There's been a sudden surge of media interest in the Club World Cup here in the United States. The hype here around this tournament has been interesting, to say the least. But at least there are realistic reports about attendance expectations. Plenty of tickets are still available, at least that's the way it is here in the Washington, D.C. region. Now, those tickets might strike you as kind of expensive, but not really, especially not given the types of teams that are going to this event. Audi Field seats about 20,000 people, which means that even the cheapest seats are going to be really good seats. Now, the real problem here is that nobody cares about the competition. And if you look at its history, the reason why nobody cares becomes pretty obvious. The history books will tell you that this April 9, 1887 match between Aston Villa and Hibernian was the first Club World Cup type match. In all honesty, the only reason that this match has any sort of notoriety is because both clubs were cup-winning sides by that time. This was really just a friendly. There really wasn't much hype behind this match at all, and there was no tournament behind it either. Anyway, for what it's worth, Aston Villa was victorious. Starting in 1909, the Sir Thomas Lipton Trophy was a 4-team competition in Turin, Italy, between 4 European clubs. The Football Association of England refused to allow a team to attend, so the organizers invited amateur side West Auckland FC to be part of the 1909 tournament. Though it was a team made up mostly of coal miners, West Auckland managed to win the tournament in both 1909 and 1911, the only 2 years in which it was held. That gives you an idea of just how strong the continental clubs were at the time. Of course, it wasn't until the 1950s and the post-war rise of the so-called floodlight football that people started to take international club football competitions a little more seriously. Now, the European Cup was a big deal right when it started in 1955, that much is clear from the old newspapers. England wasn't represented for bizarre political reasons, but at least Scotland was. Now, today's Club World Cup, a global competition for clubs, probably has its roots in the Copa Rio held in Brazil in 1951 and 1952. Whether that tournament counts or not is controversial itself, since many clubs decided not to participate, although Juventus did. Frankly, outside of Brazil, this doesn't even seem to be much of a controversy, because nobody cares. And that's the odd thing about the Club World Cup. No matter how the competition was organized or what year it was, it seems that nobody ever really cared about it. And part of the problem, of course, is that its participation was so limited. Real Madrid won the first Intercontinental Cup in 1960, but only 2 teams participated, the champions of Europe and South America. In fact, for many years, this competition was just a series of 2 matches featuring only the champions of Europe and South America. And the one thing you'll notice in the history is that the European winners had a tendency to decline to participate. Well, it's a bad sign for your competition when teams don't want to be in it. The problem in those days was the cost of travel. It wasn't all that easy to get from Europe to South America in the early 1960s. In fact, it's really not all that easy to do that today either. The 2-legged home and away format just didn't work. Well, this all changed in early 1981 when Toyota took over the sponsorship. The competition was moved to the old National Stadium in Tokyo and was changed to a single match. A crowd of 62,000 people watched as Victorino scored this goal to put Nottingham Forest away in the first Tokyo final. Now, if you look closely, you'll notice that the pitch was in horrible shape. The awful state of the grass caused John McGovern to refuse to play. Part of the problem, of course, was that this match was held in February, and Forest had an FA Cup match against Bristol City later on that week. Now, Forest did beat Bristol City despite the 40 hours of air travel, but they certainly showed signs of wear. And that touches on the real problem with the Club World Cup, one that Football Manager players who have played through it are all too familiar with. It's just not a convenient competition. It never has been. You either had to travel to the middle of nowhere in the middle of the season, or you had to cut your summer short for a competition that most people honestly have never heard of. Plus, for international television purposes, these games were played at high noon in Japan. The old conclusion was that the South American teams tended to care a lot more about these finals than the European teams. That's not to say that the European teams didn't try. Liverpool certainly did here in this 1984 match. However, when you look at the awful conditions of some of these Winter Cup matches, like this one in 1987, you really have to wonder if it was worth attending at all. Well, is there any wonder that the competition was so unpopular? I mean, the clubs hated it since they missed time during whatever December break they had. The fans certainly weren't happy that it was being played on the other side of the world. And the big question is, why hold a competition in Asia that Asian teams can't qualify for? The end of the single-match era came in 2004, and of course that one was played in awful December weather, this time in Yokohama. That 0-0 match went to penalties, which is always frustrating for fans. In 2005, FIFA stepped in and changed things up, expanding the tournament to 6 teams held in 3 different cities. Sao Paulo wound up defeating Liverpool in the final, held in December again and only held in Japan. In 2009, the competition finally left Japan, going to the UAE briefly. It remained a small December competition through 2023, held either in Japan or the Middle East. And that brings us to the split between the Club World Cup and the Intercontinental Cup. So you see, the old Intercontinental Cup format lives on under the name of the Intercontinental Cup and consists of the regional Champions League winners playing against each other. The new Club World Cup, however, is designed to be an actual World Cup for clubs. And yeah, this is really confusing. FIFA came out with the announced new format back in 2019 and was planning on rolling it out during 2021. China was supposed to host that tournament in 2021, which of course is really ironic given what happened. So after COVID-19 made the 2021 tournament impossible, FIFA announced that a new 32-team tournament would start in 2025. FIFA's president apparently announced this without getting agreement from the domestic leagues first, but it seems in the end that nobody really cared. And in a move with quite a bit of political significance, the venue shifted from China to the United States. Well, I guess this is good for American soccer, though I'm not going to guarantee that any of these matches will sell out. Now, for Chinese football, of course, this is absolutely horrible news. China has been declining in football prominence since before the pandemic, and not being able to host this tournament really can only hurt things for them. Well, since FIFA is in charge of this, there's the usual ambiguous allocation of slots according to whatever criteria they can come up with. So this year, 12 of the 32 clubs will be from Europe. There are 6 clubs from South America, 4 from Brazil and 2 from Argentina. And there are 4 clubs from Africa and 4 from Asia, including a Japanese club. Well, that seems pretty fitting since Japan hosted this competition for decades without ever having a domestic team in it. I mean, Japanese football wasn't exactly spectacular in the 1980s, but it still seems strange to me that Japan would host a major competition that it couldn't qualify for. And then comes the controversy, the 5 North American slots. The controversial part is the fact that Inter Miami got in, almost certainly by virtue of having big names on its roster. And in the end, there's also Auckland City representing Oceania. Well, I was hoping for a team from Kiribati, but it's okay. Anyway, the idea here is to make this a competition that's played once every 4 years. Honestly though, we'll see if there's ever an edition after 2025. There are a ton of problems with this format. Since football is a contact sport, there are obvious concerns about player safety. Football isn't a sport that you're supposed to play 12 months of the year. There are also concerns about transfer windows that should be familiar to anybody seriously addicted to Football Manager, as I am. And then there's the little detail about multiple competing teams sharing the same ownership, which is a nightmare that the real World Cup has never had to deal with. MLS players have been furious about the low amount of compensation given to participating players. Oh, and yeah, there's also that little thing about the current state of immigration enforcement in the United States, which isn't exactly friendly to major international sports tournaments. Anyway, this has all the markings of being a disaster. It's the sort of tournament that looks like a great idea on paper, but if they can make this work despite the myriad of problems this time around, maybe we'll see something permanent settle in, but I wouldn't bet money on it.